Hello, and thank you very much for watching this recording about how to redefine corporate cybersecurity frameworks under situations like COVID-19. Um, I'm Jesus Escolar, and I will conduct you through this little journey about the redefinition of those frameworks. So, we at Accelerates are an organization that has been active in the open source ecosystem since a long time, providing and promoting plenty of integrations and solutions. We operate in the cybersecurity and cyber intelligence across EMEA, and our goal is actually to participate, evangelizing, and promoting our knowledge across the ecosystem. So our basis is educate, help, build, and repeat again. I'm the CEO of Acceleris, and I have a large experience on the different fields related with cybersecurity and cyber intelligence. And one of the goals is that this presentation tells you about all of the frameworks that we worked during the last years, and how when this situation happened across the world, we were not ready to respond properly, and this is what we're going to see now. What are at the moment cybersecurity frameworks? Well, when you talk about security, you talk about all the different solutions that you need to put in place, and all the different elements and objects and procedures that you have to construct in order to be secure. For us, it's a process of harmonization. We have to level the same level of understanding between the different groups and business units in a company, in an organization, in order to be able to provide a full view on the overall security. Frameworks build those best practices that the organizations use to have a vision and a strategy over the years to come, and establishing a well-known cybersecurity plans. It's guidance, it's achieving compliance, it's getting to the level where organizations want to be in terms of maturity and security. The purpose they serve is to actually integrate all the risks that are inherent in an organization, which are related to the people, the processes, and the technology used, which all combined together, they define a business. This business is at risk all the time, and the people that are at risk, and the information of the company is always at risk, even the information of the consumers, or the users, or the customers. So it's very important that we have an actual element to establish a baseline across all the different security methods that we use in the different areas, to put them all together and to harmonize that. For us, this is going to be a cybersecurity framework, and it's going to be there to maintain a relationship between compliance, security incidents, and resolutions, which basically it's what we want. We want to be compliant, to not have any security issues of any type, and when we have them, we have to be able to respond and then to resolve them and make sure that we don't have them again and again. How many cybersecurity frameworks exist? There are too many. But if we center ourselves into the most important ones, we can look, for example, at the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST. We can look, for example, at PCI DSS as one of the cybersecurity frameworks for payment, card payments. We can look at the ISO models, 27001 or 002. We can look, for example, at CIS, which is mainly and broadly used across different organizations, and especially those who actually are tied a lot with, for example, cloud containers. We have plenty of open source solutions behind that. that help us achieve CIS compliance and make sure that we are aligned. Or, for example, we can look into the beautiful CSA, Cloud Control Matrix, CCM, which is very interesting when it comes to cloud solutions, cloud providers, to be actually compliance certified. So the goal is that we have to look into the frameworks and understand that they are actually related to a process where we see a posture, we describe who's going to be the target for that security posture that we take in, we improve the posture, we assess it, the progress, and see how good are we at deploying a framework, and then we make sure that we communicate internally against the findings and the resolutions of that particular assessment with the security posture that we wanted to apply. And then we go, as I said, we keep on looping the same process again and again and again. The problem is that those frameworks are very good when we are in an ideal world. And in an ideal world, everything happens that we wake up in the morning at 9, we go to work, everybody goes back at home at 5, like in an ideal world. But we are not in an ideal world. So we see at the moment plenty of changes in the way that the world tends to evolve, especially when it comes to technology. And then when it comes to technology means cybersecurity, and how do we apply these cybersecurity elements into our organizations. And a situation like a pandemic, for example, which was totally unexpected, it was an example that we were at risk of disrupting all our activities and all our potential standardized processes with cyber attacks that we were not expecting, with changes in technologies, with accelerations in decisions. Everything came to be accelerated and forced at the moment that the pandemic exploded, and nobody was ready for that. And the worst thing about it is that when you make the wrong decisions, you actually impact cybersecurity because you're not taking in consideration what are going to be the consequences of those decisions, especially in IT. A lot of companies, we saw it in first hand, they accelerated all the processes, they took all the frameworks and they said, okay, well, these are the frameworks that we're using at the moment, and it happens that we need to put 3,000 people, for example, in remote office, giving them hardware, non-classified, certified, non-validated, with solutions that were not in place in the beginning, that were deployed. Usually it would take 1 or 2 years to do a proper deployment and fit into the proper cybersecurity frameworks and have everything, all the boxes ticked and having a proper audit. And a lot of companies just went crazy and they decided just to deploy everything because the business must go on. And this is something very important. If we follow the musical group Queen, they say the show must go on, and this is the first amendment that happens to be present in all the companies. You need to keep on business. The business goes first, and that implies that a lot of elements, like for example, uncontrolled devices, rogue accesses were given, a lot of uncontrolled hardware was distributed, permissions were assigned without control, and data was open to people without even classification. And all of that was totally against all of those frameworks, but nobody could do anything because we had that particular problem, how we were going to change the paradigm. Well, here we go. The way to change it is, and this is why we need to redefine in the cybersecurity frameworks for this type of situations, is that we can do it the hard way, which is ask all of these organizations to rewrite the frameworks and restructure them and actually rewrite them for all possible situations, like an exercise, which is going to be very difficult and it's going to be nearly impossible to achieve. They will have to revisit their models and actually reassess themselves and think that probably they're not doing it right, they're not doing it properly. That also means that potentially their model is not working and they have to accept it. And it they will have to rebuild that model again and again for every different situation, which is a very difficult case. Rewriting or rebuilding a cybersecurity framework, it's going to be very complex when it comes from the organization who actually manages it. But so what are going to be the conclusions and takeaways that we're going to have out of the redefinition, redefining the actual cybersecurity frameworks, is that those models are not canon, but they are standards. So they are not actually expected to be the religion behind it. So they work when everything works. So it's not law. It's not a definition of, if when we put it in place, this is the way it has to be. When everything falls into place, they actually operate properly. They are there to be challenged. We need to challenge them all the time. If we don't challenge them, there will be additional risks, like, for example, it happened with the pandemic that we had, that changed completely our way to operate our cybersecurity operations, way to use it, basically, way to implement it. When something is unexpected, we have to think again. We have to bring it back again into the table and think, okay, we have a situation that we don't know what to do with. How are we going to actually rebuild or models to fit the situation, not the opposite? How are we going to take the situation and make it fit into our model? Every time we rewrite something for good, it's going to be the best for all of us. So we're going to get new models, we're going to be evolving models, and we're going to have something that is built for the benefit of all of us based on these situations. And we need to create new paradigms, which means, like, when we have a situation like COVID, we need to think about, did somebody thought about this actual pandemic situation within their documents? And they thought, what happens when I have to open completely all the accesses to the people in the space of 24 hours, 48 hours? What are the steps to follow? None of that was considered before, and it has to be actually added by creating new ways of thinking. So how do we solve complex problems if we don't have complex solutions? And this is one of the big problematic situations that we have with the existing cybersecurity frameworks, is that they are very complex, and the situations that we have are also very complex. And it's very difficult to put them in place when there are situations where, as I said before, everything has to fall in place in order for everything to work properly. And in order to use properly the frameworks, we need to challenge the existing status quo. So how do we do that? Why don't we use a new paradigm? Why we don't create what we have called here a continuous cybersecurity frameworks improvement, which basically is taking the existing frameworks, putting them into place, but also challenging them to be rebuilt and make them adaptive by using serious games. And a serious game, for example, is what the Department of Homeland Security in the US does when they challenge a situation about rioting or a terrorist attack in a certain city or a pandemic situation. And for example, you can actually challenge your company with serious games, establishing what happens if tomorrow we have a massive pandemic, or we have a power outage, or we have terrorist attack, or we have a situation where the whole businesses in the whole region, even with worldwide impact, gets affected. And how can we actually, what decisions are going to be made, and what are going to be actually the impact of those business decisions into cybersecurity, have them in advance, and actually, as we say below, build a continuous learning model into your framework to actually rebuild it and rebuild it and rebuild it and adapt it to situations that you were not expecting. In order to actually have a proper cybersecurity framework, it needs to be challenged and it needs to be rebuilt. And it needs to be rebuilt based on elements that are not the existing elements that we use today, neither the metrics or the controls that we have, but new approaches and a new way of thinking. Thank you very much. I'll hope that you enjoyed the presentation, and if there are any questions, I will be very happy to take them. Thank you.